Pat Martin. Welcome to Biscuits and Jam.
Thanks for having me, man. I appreciate it very much.
It's good to see you again.
You too.
You know, I'm a big fan of your restaurants, and especially the one in Birmingham, which is kind of right down the street from me. That's been a real lifeline for me since y'all built that place.
Yeah, I appreciate it, man. I'm proud to be down there. I'm glad it's convenient for you. And I'm good. I'm glad we're doing still a good enough job that you're coming in the doors. So.
Oh, I love it. I love it. I mean, those dry rubbed wings are a big hit in my family. Yeah. I mean, I love the brisket sandwich. I mean, there's just and just the barbecue is just great. It's so
Thanks,
good.
Man. I appreciate that.
So, Pat, congrats on the new TV show.
Thanks, bud. I appreciate that.
It's called Life of Fire, right?
Yeah, we went through a couple different names. I mean, sure, we'll get into it in a minute, but the first name I hated, and I worked through, and they were great to look to change it. And it just it was called Gods of Barbecue, and I'm a big proponent of humility, one in general, but two, definitely in barbecue. There's so much, I guess a lot because of competition barbecue with television. You know, it's like television really, I think, has driven a lot of this, some non-humility in some of it. And so I didn't like that title. So they were great. We changed it to Life of Fire, which happens to be the title of my book. And it's really more descriptive of what I'm trying to accomplish on the show anyway.
Yeah, I think it's a good title change. That sounds a lot more like you.
Yeah. They had named the show before I had committed. They had already had the show kind of, pitched, actually greenlit. And so I was like, guys, we were about three episodes in. I was like, I need to sit down. We got to talk about this title. So It went from Gods of Barbecue to Legends of Barbecue, and then I kept trying to get it like, we're going to talk about, I want to shoot a lot of barbecue, but I also want to shoot a lot of, stuff that is not necessarily grilling, like sitting around a Weber grill, but live fire cooking, and just it broadens the scope of it just a little bit, but still stays true to what it is, with barbecue still being the backbone to it, but gave us some flexibility to tell some more stories.
Well, so tell me, what's been the highlight for you of doing this? This is your first TV show that I'm aware of. What's been the highlight?
Well, to tell you the highlight, I have to go back like around 2000. I opened in 2006, so this is 18 years now I've been in the business, like officially. And in 2010, 11, that era, I had signed with a talent agency, and that was in Southern Food. I mean, I don't have to tell you, it was like on fire. Yeah. And I was going to do a series there with Al Roker's production company, and some things that we signed our contract. And over the course of the year before we actually got started, I was like, this hitting me. I mean, I traveled enough, still travel, but the finest, best hotel room in the world still ain't your mattress.
Yeah.
It's not, man, or your shower for that matter. So I just, I loved restaurants, so I wanted to kind of just really focus on that. So our year contract expired, and I was like, I think, they were going to re-up, and I was like, I think I'm good. I just don't think this really is me, And I'm glad that happened, because that path was going towards the Food Network side. And nothing against that, especially then. I mean, that was ages ago now in entertainment world. It wasn't where I was, and so got into doing restaurants. And then when Patrick Whelan and AZ, we talked about doing something right before COVID.
This is Andrew Zimmern?
Yeah. And I'm sorry. And, it was COVID hit, and then it just kind of went away. And I'm not, looking to do anything. I wasn't even looking for this, but given the opportunity to tell something fun and authentic, both of those words, like bold them and underline them, I was, and not waste my time, was good. And so this summer or last summer, they reached out and said, hey, I think we've got something here ready to go if you're still up. They let me have a real heavy hand in the creative, a very heavy hand in it. And that's the context to lead up to answer your question is that what was fun about this was One, the relationship. I mean, Intuitive could not be a better production company to work for. I mean, I've done a lot of TV on the segment side, but obviously this is my first foray on the production side. And so these guys are literally hard to beat. So easygoing. And, like I said, they gave me this unbelievable freedom to create these episodes. And I wished... My only regret is I wish they were an hour long instead of 30-minute episodes, because there's just, man, and barbecue and all that, there's so much to tell, because I don't know if there is a food or a genre globally that is a better vehicle to tell about somebody or a community or culture than cooking over a bed of coals. So I wish it were a little bit longer, but it's not. So maybe that means we just got to do more of it. I don't know.
Well, it's called editing, Pat.
Yeah, there was very little editing too. That's what else. Like, I went up to Minneapolis and met with them, and they were like, "How do you see it?" And I was like, "Do you remember Tony Bourdain's first show? Not the one, not Parts Unknown, but No Reservations. Just how raw and gritty it was, and this guy, Patrick McMahill, who's also another saint who works with Intuitive, who's really kind of spearheading this. And he was like, yes, very little editing, very, like, we just follow along. I was like, that's going to have to be it for me, because I'm just not wired. My brain just doesn't work the way I guess some people, where they just do retakes and, makeup. Like, there's no makeup. You can't put enough makeup on my face anyway. And so, so it was just really easy. It was good.
Well, I can't wait to see it. And I want to come back to it in a minute, but first I want you to tell me a little bit about where you grew up in Corinth, Mississippi.
Well, actually, I spent so much of my childhood there, but I was born in Memphis. My family, both sides, are from Corinth, which is about 65 miles almost due east of Memphis, actually, because Memphis hugs the very southwest corner of the state of Tennessee, and Corinth hugs the very, very northeast corner of the state of Mississippi. So it's just kind of like almost due east. And, my granddad farmed. My dad's dad was a farmer, and still on right on Highway 72. And my dad did not. He had two brothers and a sister. He did not have any interest in taking over the family farm, and he went and played basketball at Mississippi State. He got a scholarship to go down and play, and he got a degree in finance, or really in economics. And so Dad went into Memphis into the bond business, and he and a guy named Ralph Horn, who was the old CEO of First Tennessee, built First Tennessee's legendary bond division, now legendary bond division. And then Dad moved, he got a job in New York, in the city, so we moved to Connecticut when I was like 2.5 or so, almost 3 years old.
Oh, I didn't realize you were that young. Wow.
Yeah, and we moved up there, and it wasn't a culture shock for me until I kind of got into like really elementary school, and it was just like every grade we went to, every grade I went up to, like from the 3rd grade to the 4th grade, 4th grade to the 5th grade, it was, does your family have running water? Or, some of these questions were serious, and some of them were just jokes. But we would go home in the summers. We'd go to Corinth in the summer, and I spent an enormous amount of time on the farm with my pawpaw before he passed. He passed when I was in my teens. That was just home, my roots. I mean, up the road were all my, aunts and uncles and cousins, and I couldn't wait to get back to Corinth every second we could get. We would go for the entire Christmas break of 3 weeks, and then we always got out later up there than they got out in the South, and we'd start school later. So I just spent a ton of time in the summers there, and had already had my friends when we moved to Corinth. My pawpaw died eventually, and I think my dad just kind of was like, really, it just hit him, and he had support with my Aunt Kathy and my uncle. My Uncle Mike and Jack lived off, and my Aunt Kathy lived in Tupelo, and then everybody was around there. But I think he really hit him to like, hey, it's time for us to get back home. So I moved back and finished my junior and senior year at Kossuth High School, which is right outside of Corinth, and then I went up to a little school up in West Tennessee, Freed Hardeman, to go up there. I was going to try to walk on and play basketball, but blew out an ACL and some grades, and that didn't work. But I did learn how to cook whole hog in Henderson, so that was my childhood trajectory and path.
Talk to me about the cooks in your family. It seems like there were a lot of them, but when you think about all of the cooks in your family, who was one that had probably the most influence on you?
Well, I'll talk about them. I mean, the women in my family were all like, it's from that generation, where everybody grew their garden and just, canned and put everything up and, just made breakfast every day, and supper every night, So I was blessed, but I think a lot of people that had grandparents and parents and at my age and before, probably, especially in the South, were blessed to have a lot of them, not everybody, but with the same thing. My mother and my Aunt Kathy they're still alive. They're incredible cooks. My mother's had a very heavy hand in my new breakfast and lunch spot, Sweet Milk, and training for the Biscuits and all that there. My grandmothers were incredible, but my dad's mom, Noni, she was like the all-star, and like she was, how everybody used to have like the church cookbooks, like the Methodists had theirs, and
yeah. Oh yeah,
Baptists had theirs. We were Church of Christ people had theirs, and you were only in that if you were in the Church of Christ cookbook, you were only in that cookbook if you were Church of Christ. I don't care what you did that was Christ-like. If you're Southern Baptist, you weren't getting that book. You know what I mean? But Mama's rolls and biscuits were so widely famous in that little county, that little northeast corner, that she was in everybody's cookbook, especially her rolls.
This is your dad's mother?
My dad's mother, yeah. And then
what was her name? What was her name?
Huh?
What was her name?
Noni Martin, N-O-N-I-E. Yeah. It was Noni Sue Martin, but she gave herself a middle name because my great-grandmother didn't give her a middle name. So she just decided Sue sounded good, so that was it. At the same time, though, so like there's that foundational part of like the table, so to speak. I mean, it was my grandmother. She was a teller at Bank of Mississippi, and she literally made biscuits every morning. When she was a widow, she would get up and make a small little cast iron thing of 4 biscuits. I mean, she cooked literally every day, and so that was a foundational cornerstone, and then. Every weekend, the men in my family, even like when we lived up in Connecticut, like Dad would grill out, and it was just burgers and steaks. We didn't cook barbecue in my family, but we ate a lot of barbecue. I mean, I was born in Memphis, but we never had a gas grill. And it was always the whole process of starting a fire with a charcoal chimney, which I'd always heard like a man from Corinth had the patent on that. I don't know if that's true or not, but it was always kind of like, this is what we use. And I remember going over a buddy of mine's house one day, and his dad had a gas grill, and I was like, Dad, why don't we get a gas grill? He just lights it up. And my dad's sometimes stoic, but he just was, whatever he was doing, packing the paper on it or whatever. And he just kind of looked up, he said, because we don't do it that way. We do it this way. And I was like,
okay.
Yes, sir. He didn't say it rude, but it was just like, just because this is the way we do it. But everything with the men in my family was always when we'd be back home in the summers in Corinth, like we were grilling every weekend. If we weren't frying fish, like we'd fry fish in the carport sometimes, but usually, a lot of times we were grilling out, and it was just the whole process of the method of it. It wasn't this instantaneous thing. Like we were going to hang out on the carport, we were going to talk, and that had a pretty profound effect on me. They shined their shoes even when they didn't have to, and changed their oil even when they didn't have to. So it was this there's just certain things you do, and there's a certain way you do them. So you kind of take that impact that had two effects. One, sitting out in this fire he was always a Weber grill, or we would go to barbecue joints, but it was that male impact over here of like, this is what we're going to do. And then the women in my family were just, I mean, you just couldn't, you were going to learn how to cook whether you wanted to or not. You were just around it, you know. And I named my breakfast spot Sweet Milk because my grandmother, Noni, my mama, there wasn't a time you could go to the refrigerator. She asked for milk. That if it was butter, and she was talking about buttermilk, if they asked for milk, you know what I mean? Like that's weird to people now, but that's the profound, that was the main staple in the fridge. So, but if she wanted whole milk, she's like, get the Sweet Milk. It's got the red cap on it. She called whole milk. Everybody did call it Sweet Milk, you know, but like, there's those little things like that just like, you just picked it up, you know, and, so I would say to answer your question, the coupling of those two things really came together, and I got into wanting to grill. I bought my first cookbook by Chris Schlesinger and Doc Willoughby when I was a freshman or sophomore in high school. And, you know, I think that was like the next graduation for me, like to kind of learn. I was just going to do it as a hobby, you know, because I was just going to be a bond trader like Dad one day. But, and I eventually went on with that. But I would say Noni is like the big, like influence, like name influence, but it wasn't just her. Like it was a coupling. It was several folks around that really set my trajectory, so to speak.
Well, and you talked about your mom a lot in your book, Life of Fire, and especially her desserts.
Yeah.
And I know she's been involved with helping you with some of the desserts at Martin's. I mean, when you think back about the desserts that your mom would make, is there one that kind of jumps out at you that you just always loved?
Coconut cake. Or strawberry pie, one of the two. Actually, I don't think I could ever choose one over the other. You know, Shoney's made that strawberry pie really famous, you know, back when we were young. And Mom made hers, but she didn't make them with whole strawberries, you know, like it was such an easy pie to make. But the thing that really makes them different is how you start getting into crusts and Cool Whip or no Cool Whip, and we won't get into that on this podcast, or anything. But you know, she didn't have those big giant strawberries in there. You know, like she cut hers up into like little quarters, and it's just like you can't stop eating it. Like, you know, and then her coconut cake, she was very unique with that. I mean, my grandmother, her name was Nadine. She was an unbelievable cook, unbelievable. But Mama was like, really had a heavy hand too, and my mom's learning how to cook even better. And my Noni had an incredible coconut cake, the typical, like, you know, stacked cake that was round, you know. But Mom put hers in a cake pan, and
like a sheet pan, here,
yeah, the sheet pan, and she was very particular about. It had to be frozen coconut. She still is today, and it has to be frozen coconut from Guatemala. It can't be frozen coconut from El Salvador. And she laid them out for me one day, and it's the same brand and everything. And one of them is shorter and stubbier than the other one. She's like, "This is the best one. It flakes better, or whatever." But she put almond extract in her cake, and the almond extract is it's literally the secret weapon to a coconut cake. Like, she would just take her little fork tines and go through it all the way and just pour it over. And, you know, on a cake pan, because of the heat, it'll rise more in the middle and it kind of rounds, you know, kind of like starts to fall off towards the edges. So you'd have to sit there with a rubber spatula as you poured it on there and kind of just keep peeling it back up, you know, especially like the Coco Lopez, and so it would all get even, not fall off the sides and make the sides soggy. But Mom's desserts, she kind of took what Mama did and just put her own spin on them, and it's hard to say make them better, but made them better. Yeah. You know, and my Aunt Kathy's like the same. My dad's sister, like they're just like my daughter Daisy now. She's 17. I'm like, listen, and she cooks, you know, but I'm like, she likes like chef driven stuff, and I'm like, Daisy, that's great, but you got to get in the kitchen and you got to learn some of these old ways, man. Like, you're it, you know. So
write them down, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Pat, let's talk barbecue for a second. And you know, you mentioned this earlier, but you know, you went to college and up in Henderson, Tennessee, which is kind of near Jackson, I think.
Yeah.
So maybe an hour east of Memphis. Talk to me a little bit about the barbecue culture in Henderson and how that influenced you.
The only thing I knew until I graduated high school really about barbecue was Memphis style barbecue. I mean, that was just really, that was it. And when I got to Henderson, I mean, it's literally like day 2 or 3. Like, you get in your dorm, you go buy your books, you're getting settled in. And like, I ate barbecue at a minimum of once a week. And so it's like, okay, what's the barbecue joints around? And Henderson's not huge. I mean, I don't know, it probably had 3,000-4,000 people in the town. It was a typical county seat for Chester County. And the first place I ever went to was a place called Thomas and Webb Barbecue. And I walked in, typical little barbecue joint with just 4 or 5 tables, a little vending thing. You could get your Cokes out over here, and Little Debbie's and stuff scattered around, and like chips hanging on that little clip thing. Man opened the window. What do you have? I said, I like a regular sandwich with slaw. He said, mild or hot sauce? Mild. And he literally just turned to his right and picked his cardboard up, and there was a hog laying on the counter. And it's funny, like, I think back at now, especially being a restaurateur, like, literally, man, I'm not joking, like, back on the wall back here was like a weed eater, tools, 5-gallon thing, had kerosene written on it, and big, had been spray painted or whatever on it,
Right.
Like,
might not have passed the health inspector.
I don't think it would have passed health, no. But, it was great. But, so he made me my sandwich, and I was just like dumbfounded. I can remember literally sitting here telling you right now like it was yesterday, and I was just like, I've got to learn how to do this. Because in Chris Schlesinger's book, he had a section there that it's called Thrill of the Grill, about his dad would always cook a whole hog one day. So I remember in high school, I was like, I'd like to do that sometime. And then unbeknownst to me, I just go 45 minutes up the road, and there it is. Well, that was my opening to, one, I developed a very close relationship with Mr. Harold. He had no secrets, and he taught me everything that at the beginning stages I know about, and I still cook a whole hog the way he taught me. But it opened my whole world up to this culture of West Tennessee whole hog barbecue, which is, it's almost extinct now, but at the time even, it was very small. There was only about 4 or 5 counties that did it. Everybody was cooking over pit barbecue, but not everybody was cooking whole hog. And it's different than the Carolinas, and it's still the bastard child, so to speak, of whole hog barbecue, the Carolinas, and it doesn't bother me, but there's just so much more critical mass of whole hog barbecue in the coastal areas in North Carolina down to South Carolina, and then even on into Georgia, obviously. And then you just got this pocket in the Mid-South that's somehow it ended up here, and so it doesn't get talked about. It's never been talked about very much. I don't think I really realized how special it was until jump ahead 15, 20 years later, and I became a member of the SFA, and John T. and them, their first ever SFA docu-series anything was on West Tennessee whole hog, and I've never asked him this, I should, but I'm guessing is because it was right at the beginnings of the Southern Foodways Alliance, and probably didn't have just a stockpile of cash sitting around so everybody could fly around and do whatever. So Henderson was pretty close to Oxford or that West Tennessee, and it was a rabbit hole of it, and I knew everybody that they had interviewed, and I was like, wow. And so then I took a job trading bonds over at Nations Bank in Charlotte. And I transferred to Lipscomb. I drank some beers, and Freed kicked me out. So I went to another Church of Christ school that didn't ask so many questions, I guess. But
Lipscomb.
So that's how I got to Nashville. I know, and I graduated, but I right out of college, right out of Lipscomb, I went to Charlotte and went to work at Nations Bank, which is now Bank of America. And every weekend I was riding around. I literally would spend every Saturday and Sunday just driving to go eat barbecue, and I got opened up to that, and so the more barbecue I ate outside of where I learned it, the more I realized how special and rare West Tennessee whole hog was just in general, but two was becoming, because the economics of barbecue and family-run barbecue restaurants, it's our peasant food as Americans. Like, there's still this mantra that it should be cheap, you know, and it's like there's nothing more labor-intensive than cooking barbecue in general, let alone whole hog. And, you know, they just started dying off, because in my generation, your generation, I mean, I don't know about your parents, but my parents, it was a privilege to go to college. You know, a lot of folks they just went to work somewhere, either a farm or wherever. So now you've got this generation come up who are like, yeah, you know what, I'm not going to break my back on the farm or do whatever, and I'm certainly not going to sit up and cook a hog for 24 hours and sell it for $2.50 for a sandwich. And so these things just started dying off, and as that culmination of all that was happening, it just became more and more and more rare and special to me personally, because it's my roots, you know.
So, Pat, I mean, there's, you know, West Tennessee barbecue, whole hog barbecue that you're talking about, but you know, you're from Memphis, which is also my hometown, and you know, Memphis is known for, you know, the Rendezvous and the Cozy Corner and Payne's and all these incredible places. But what you're talking about is different. It's unique. This is not the same as a Memphis barbecue, right?
No, it's not the same in a lot of ways, you know. You know, Memphis barbecue really, especially in the last probably 50 odd years, really a lot of people you don't hear it talked about enough, but one of the stylistic things about Memphis barbecue is probably one of the first of the big five or regional barbecues that actually started using charcoal briquettes as a fuel source, you know, because it was a lot of the barbecue joints, the great ones, were in the inner city. And it wasn't that, I'm just pontificating here, but it wasn't fire codes that was keeping them from using wood to burn down. Some of them were, but it was just ease. You know, like I can buy a bag of charcoal and briquettes, and Kingsford's plant's actually in Corinth. You know, it's all close. But, you know, you have that tomato mustard-based sauce, the slaw's different, and obviously they're cooking butts, maybe shoulders or shanks, but usually it was either shanks or butts. And it's funny, you just, literally, Henderson's about 85 miles due east of Memphis, and total upheaval. It's slat wood, not logs, just slat wood from the mills. You know, they would take a log and run it through, and to square it up, they would cut the round pieces off and just discard them. It's whole hogs, you know, 180 to 200 pounds. You know, we call them sausage hogs. Those are different than what they cook in the Carolinas. They cook around 125 pounds. They chop everything together, like the hams and the belly and the shoulder. We do not. We pull it individually. And that spawned a whole thing of folks came in and ordered their barbecue how they wanted it. Like, I want lean meat, you know, do you want extra lean? That meant the loin. Or do you want lean, which meant the ham? Or do you want fatty meat? You know what I mean? So it was very unique that way. We didn't mix our flavor profiles in with it. You know, it was naked. So, you know, if you screwed it up, there wasn't any hiding it, you know. Yeah. And then the slaw, and then it was always like a sweeter vinegar-based sauce. So that's a typical sandwich.
Different deal.
Yeah, way different than Memphis, man.
Well, so, Pat, I want to go back to the show for a second. You know, you've been going around and cooking with all these different folks, and which has got to be an adventure for you, and just so cool to, you know, see so many people doing it in different ways, and they've got their own culture. They've got their own way of doing things. Tell me, you know, one person or a couple of people that have really inspired you throughout this process that you've met through the show.
There was only two people that I had not met. Everybody else I lined up, and I wanted a mixture of you know, like we shot Chris Lilly. Chris just came over to my farm this weekend. We cooked paella together with a couple buddies of mine. So I was just with him 2 days ago. But, you know, that story of Big Bob's and that white sauce is so legendary. And so I wanted some of those like stories you've already heard about to be told, just so it wasn't totally unfamiliar. But I also wanted to I mean, it's on Outdoor Channel. A lot of people still don't know that they're moving towards a lot of food programming. Just kind of, I'm just guess shifting. So Andrew Zimmern's got his. I think he's on his 5th series with his show there now. And you've got Ellen Marie Bennett coming out and Jess Prowls. So because I knew a lot of people that would be watching it, I didn't want to shy away from some of the real stories to be told. It wasn't just like not just going to sit here and shoot a bunch of redneck guys who deer hunt and fish, bass fish, right? So I had some familiar faces, but I also went into some bounds. Like I did Brian Furman with his ribs and Howard Conyers. Howard's been a little lightning rodish for some folks, and I wanted that. But it was fun. It was comfortable too. And then we did... this is one of the guys I didn't know. This guy Yia Vang, he was a Hmong. He's from Laos originally, but he was his new restaurant is the name after the camp that they put them in right after the Vietnam War, and he was born in that camp, and so we did a whole pig's head in the ground and did all the purple sticky rice and like telling his story about how the Lutherans, somehow went over there and they brought the largest Hmong, population in the country is in Minneapolis. So we were outside of Minneapolis. We were right over the line in Wisconsin, actually. But he's telling that story. And then I would say one of the most, as a barbecue guy, one of the most like slap in the face. Hey, bro, like you think you've got it all, it all after you've been cooking for 30 plus years, but you don't. Is this guy Nick Predite. What they did was we had to go one place because the budget was so tight and shoot 2 episodes. So I went to LA and shot with Adam Perry Lang, who's a very, very good friend of mine. And Adam's show was maybe the funnest show I did because Adam has no rules. Like he just thinks outside the box. So we did a tuna collar and we cooked it in barbecue style, but we drove up the road to go see Nick. And when I called Nick on the phone, I knew we had a friend of a friend. When I called Nick to check in, I was like, I want to tell this story on like Santa Maria style barbecue and like that whole, like the gauchos and all that. And he's a younger guy and he was real quick to be like, he said something to the effect like, all right, well look, Pat, like if you want to tell it, man, he's like, I'm going to tell it the way it really is. I'm not going to sugarcoat it with the way everybody. I was like, so immediately I'm like, okay. I don't know Santa Maria style barbecue is this lightning rod aspect of bar. I was like, so tell me about this. He was like, real Santa Maria barbecue is not tri-tip. And that is what I'm talking about, and that's the kind of stuff I wanted to unfold. I was like, really? He's like, no. He was like, it's a cut called the top block. He's like, tri-tip became popular in the 50s because there was a butcher in the area. He was a German guy. And nobody was buying this tri-tip, so he just started, typical capitalism at its best right there. Just, start using this instead. But the top block was the picanha, the petite sirloin, and the sirloin all in one. And it almost looks like a pork shoulder, and you just cut them into big 2-inch thick steaks. So we told that whole story, and it was just really cool, man, there's a lot of history in that, that we don't, maybe we did, but it was brushed over. Like the first cattle migration wasn't west. Like, I just remember that one. Maybe my teachers didn't even tell me. I don't know. It was north. It was from Mexico going up, and just all that settlement up there. And so I would say that the one with Nick and then and then with Brian and Howard were 3 of the best, like in terms of telling the story. And then, they were all good, Sid. I'm proud of all of them. But there were some in there that were really fun, man. I'm looking forward to y'all seeing them.
I can't wait. I can't wait to see it. Well, Pat, there are a lot of people out there that, like me, who would love to cook a whole hog and, have a big neighborhood party or something. And we actually did one a few years ago with John Michael Bodner, who was on the phone with you, and I think you were calling in some advice at the time.
Yeah, they got that hog too hot.
Probably. But What's the number one mistake that most people make when they're cooking a whole hog? And I'm sure there's lots of them, but what's the thing that, kind of comes up again and again that you see?
It's like I can put it on one page, like write it down, like this is how you do it, but it's like riding a bike or snow skiing. Like I can put that on one piece of paper too, and that just doesn't work out that way, but I would say, first of all, before I answer the question, I would encourage everybody to do it. It's just, I don't care if you ruin it. It's just, it's one of those things you will never forget doing with your friends or your family or both, whoever you're doing it with. Go screw up your backyard, go do it. But I would say that the biggest thing is temperature. I just don't think temperature and the time of it. I mean, it takes a long time and it's very low. And if you build a block pit, air is an incredible insulator. And so a lot of people they're so new to it and they're so scared of screwing it up that they don't trust the process of it. And that can't be hot enough. Let's put some more fire in there. And once you get it too hot, man, I mean, there's no coming back for you. You just got to ride it out. You can't pull them out. You can, but if once the hog starts to render, you shouldn't pull it out because you're almost invariably going to start a fire then with the grease that's dropped down in the coals. So I would say just trust the temperature, like always less is more. I mean, you can always get caught back up. The whole like stall thing that's talked about in competition barbecue, it's very true. It's the collagen that is sweating. It's literally perspiring before it turns gelatinous. And that coupled with the heat and time, they're like looking down, they're like, we got everybody coming over to eat at 6 and it's 10 or 11 that morning or even 12 and they're like, there ain't no way this thing's going to get done. We got to throw the fire to it. There's where you screw up right there. Just keep riding it. Just keep it steady. That collagen will break and you'll be good.
Just takes time.
Takes time, man. That's it.
All right. Well, I'll keep that in mind the next time I give it a shot. Pat, I wanted to end this interview talking about dessert. And the one thing that your family seems to be as passionate about as barbecue is ice cream and specifically hand cranked ice cream. So just tell me a little bit about that and why that makes such a difference.
I don't know what it was, man, but my family, my dad's side of the family are absolute psychotics. I mean, psychotic about making ice cream and just seeing how hard they can get it. So I'll just tell you a few things. One, we always used a White Mountain ice cream cooler. If you can find the ones that were made out of fiberglass, they actually make it colder. It'll frost up on the sides. There's a maker out of Pennsylvania now that makes them in the old fiberglass now, and so I haven't made a batch in that yet, but I'm going to this summer, Lord willing. But you got to use the smaller one, and the mix is the mix. It's a pretty standard vanilla ice cream prep. It's the procedure that makes it or breaks it. First of all, I don't even look at electric ice cream makers. They do not count. It's not ice cream. You're making cold, creamy dessert soup. So that's not part of the discussion. If you have one, you should just throw it out. And then you get into like the typical instructions of making ice cream will call for like rock salt. Wrong. It will call for ice. It won't just tell you ice. So what are you going to use? You're usually going to use cubed ice. It'll never get hard enough because there's too much air in there in between the cubes. We pour our cream in and we would save every carton of orange juice, wash it out, clean it out, fill it with water and put it in a deep freezer. We just just to make ice cream. And we would have just blocks of orange juice cartons filled with good clean water. And we take those out and pop them on each side. 1 quarter turn, rotate. 2, you're trying to get that ice as crushed as fine as possible. You layer a base in there, then iodized white table salt, pour it around it, and do another one. Boom, boom, boom. Layer another one, iodized white table salt. You do that until it gets to the top. I mean, like over the top of the crank, right? What happens is you start to crank it, all that finely crushed ice with the salt reforms as one ice cylinder. So now that ice is touching there are no air pockets, right? I mean, it is cold. And we would crank it, and it would always be, my sons and my cousin Zach, they didn't get it like I got it. I'd have to sit there and crank it until, like, you had all the stuff like, come on, boy, is that all you got? You can't push me? I'd be like pulling it up, pushing it down, and then finally get to the point where, I wasn't strong enough to finish it, and one of my uncles or my dad, we'd swap out and take turns, but I would always start it up until
it's a workout. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the whole thing, man. And we would crank it until literally we could not crank it anymore. It was locked. That was it. Take it, let it sit for a minute. You'd sit on it. We'd put a kitchen towel, then a bunch of newspapers on top of it while we're just cranking it like this. And then we'd go in there, and my mama always had peaches. We had a peach orchard a few miles away outside of Kossuth, and she always had like white peaches or strawberries. And she just, macerated with sugar, and that was our topping, and that was it. Like I don't ever remember us putting chocolate syrup on anything, like nothing. It was either strawberries or peaches. The process, the Martin family nutcase psychosis of making ice cream is, that is there. It's still alive and well too.
Sounds like it might be its own book someday.
It should be like a little one. Yeah, it should.
Well, Pat, last question for you. What does it mean to you to be Southern?
Everything. I mean, if you go around and you just look at, I'm not a best guy. I think best is, it's really a stupid term, thing, other than maybe like Michael Jordan. But if you look around, like the South has had every cool thing. Like, let's just take music, food, like the coolest cool things, they all came from the South. And that's just the way it is, I mean, the people, I would say that, whenever I'm traveling out, even today, as fast paced as just society in general is, there's still the slowness of the South, and just that easy taking time. I was just in Corinth, like I said, this weekend, just some buddies, and they all came in to help me blow up a beaver dam. I got this freaking beaver. I feel like Bill Murray, but like this beaver keeps winning, like absolutely keeps winning. And I got one buddy of mine who's a Navy SEAL came down, like, we're going to blow this beaver dam up, and we lost again. But just the slowness of just hanging out. Everybody in the community stops by. There is no like inviting people. Like, they just come by, and they just stop and visit. A couple folks go over and get some desserts. Chris brought some pies, and just the slowness of it, and just taking a breath, and being proud of your family, your community, your roots, where you are. That's everything. There aren't a lot of cultures still kind of driving. Everything's been so dispersed, but the South has still kind of got that, at least in America, So it's everything. It's special.
We got to, hang on to it as long as we can.
Yeah.
Well, Pat, congrats on the book. Congrats on the TV show. The restaurants, everything, and great to see you, and thanks for being on Biscuits and Jam.
Yeah, Sid, it's good to see you too, man. I hope I see you soon.
Yeah, me too.
Thanks, buddy.